Request by Trustee Walker to discuss and possibly ask for approval to change from integrated to traditional math curriculum. All right, Trustee Walker.
We've spent a lot of time with this, so if you're running the slides, we're going to go pretty quick here. Oh no.
You can hand him. I have these.
I'll put the slide up. It'll be back there for right now.
Yeah, we can.
Just discolored.
That's okay, because we have it there.
You can just flip that one off and you guys can use it.
Oh,
I've got it in front of me, so I don't. It's for them.
so it's okay. Yeah, we have it too. We have it.
Oh, I forgot to bring you a flash drive. I owe you one. Thought about something totally different.
But we have this in print, and they can see it there. Correct? Same information. All right. All right.
I don't need it. I'm right in front of me.
So it's going to be discolored, but yeah.
Mine's in color, and I have it in the large.
Well, these ones are in the correct color. It's just this one.
Oh, it's just that one.
Yeah.
Oh, I see. So this one's going to be.
Yeah.
Okay.
Well, no, it's just the.
It's the screen.
Yeah. It's the screen. Yeah. Yes.
Color does help.
It's back now.
Okay.
Patience. Okay, so I'm going to move very quickly as we've gone through most of this. The first two slides are essentially legal authority. Talked a lot about the standards tonight. The California Constitution gives the State Board of Education the right to do textbooks for grades 1 through 8. Everything at high school belongs to this board and any other governing board. That's why when they give recommendations, they stop at 8th grade. EC 60200 talks about adopting basic materials in grades 1 through 8 inclusive. It's because their authority ends at 8th grade. 60200 4A, same idea, grades of 1 through 8. 60210, local agency chooses to use materials that have not been adopted. We still have that authority to do that at this board. That's the difference in California and other states. The next one, please. You jumped one more ahead of me. 60400, governing board of each school district maintaining one or more high schools can adopt instructional materials for use in high schools under its control. 60618, actually lays out the other part of 60605, which talks about the state education standards are a model and we can adopt whatever we want to. It's not what I'm asking tonight. I just wanted to illustrate that just because somebody says something in Sacramento does not necessarily mean we have to abide by it. We do have the ability to serve our students. We're the only elected members in the state of California who are elected to represent students. And I thought that was important to point out tonight, whether I won or lost this debate. Next standard. What were the assumptions? In 97, we've talked about this. The biggest thing in this slide to me is that we have now used and say it's college and career ready. That wasn't the case before. It was college or career ready, and I still believe that to be the case. You can be getting ready for one of our CTE, ROP, or vocational tech programs while at the same time not necessarily going to college. And trying to lump them both into the same basket, I think, does a disservice. The standards don't make any separation from that. The 2010 standards we adopted lump it together. We've talked about rigor tonight. I just talked about college readiness being the same as career readiness. They're not necessarily the same. The statement about Algebra 1 is on the next slide from the California 2014 Mathematics Report from the CDE. This is the statement that physically moves Algebra 1 out of 8th grade and into 9th grade. That's the frustrating part, because at the same time they claim to have done something that moved the bar higher. They did not move the bar higher, they moved the bar down. Implication is everybody's taking the same high school math program, essentially what we've talked about tonight. There's an accelerated version, there's a slowed down version that catch people up, but essentially everybody's on the same path. There isn't a creative turn that you could go right or left on. It's MVP 1, 2, 3 or MVT heavy 1, 2, 3. If you need acceleration to prepare, where's that going to come from? That was a statement I said at the end when I said thank you for everybody that presented tonight. My concern was, what do those students do who don't have the resources I have? They're the ones I think that get lost in the shuffle here, because it's very difficult to supplement and find tutoring and find additional material if you don't have funding for it. What about California? We added calculus, we added statistics, we added algebra 2 and trigonometry, but they pulled the 8th grade algebra course out. That was due to what I talked about earlier, when they could only substitute 15% of the standards. That's a result of taking copyrighted material. It was removed, and it's still removed. It's why I'm advocating for a traditional pathway. If we had Algebra 1 in 9th grade, and we were offering it in 8th grade, those students could complete that course in 8th grade. That is something we could do and within the power of this board. Next slide. We talked about in the report we didn't get into because it was fairly lengthy. Draws a picture of California not succeeding. These are the numbers in 2004, Algebra 1 students not succeeding. All the dots are to the left and to the bottom, not doing well. If we move to the next slide, we see what happens in 2012 prior to this switch. Now we've moved over and the scatter plot moves to the right and higher. Students are achieving in Algebra 1. They are being successful. They are proficient. It's a much clearer picture when you go to the next slide and lay them on top of each other. You can see the transition that was made between 97 and 2013 when we applied high-level skills and rigor to a K through 8 program that allowed you to get to Algebra 1 in 8th grade. Next slide, same picture, different bar graph. 99, 2000, 2001, we weren't doing summative assessments on Algebra 1. But if you look at the trend as it moves across to 2013, you've got students at 14, 36. It's like they are passing. The system wasn't broken, it was pitched as broken. That's how we ended up with the standards we ended up with, that I'm clearly not a fan of. Next slide. Where did I lose it to? My computer freezes up on me now. Okay, Algebra 2. Again, you can see the success levels moving from 2002 to 2013. The picture being presented by the state that put us in the position of taking these standards was that it was broken. My contention is it wasn't broken. Next slide shows an socioeconomic background, African American, Latinos, and whites. You can see these numbers move from 2003 to 13. Socioeconomically disadvantaged students are making massive moves. African Americans are making moves. Latinos are making great improvements on the red bars. The white students not so much, but those are not the categories that are going to move as rapidly. They aren't the at-risk students. Same thing with Algebra 2, same thing with geometry. And my contention is that the system wasn't broken. We were pitched a set of standards at the national level that said, you're broken, you need better standards, you need more work. The facts don't back that up. The results are so good. What happened with California? It wasn't an issue of California not succeeding, it was a demographic shift. This demographic shift is still in place today. We have the highest rate of economically disadvantaged citizens in the country. We have the highest rate of English learners in the country. That was the change. If you account for that and still look at the progress, we were doing things correct. Next slide. California discourages acceleration. We've already done that tonight. Everything's moved to 9th grade, and that's again my concern. If you can't accelerate into an Algebra 1, Geometry, Algebra 2 track because you're good and you have to move through this system, how do you accelerate? And how do you make up the difference if you're struggling? I don't see it as a creative outcome or a creative use of curriculum. Next slide talks about grade 7 through grade 8. This is what we talked about earlier. This is where they moved out the curriculum. This is when they say that they put Algebra 1 down, but didn't because they stripped the standards out and they moved them to Common Core grade 8 standards. They do not handle or stack up to the 97 7th grade standards. The bar was lowered. Last slide shows what happened with integrated math, because in 97 you had both choices again. You still had integrated math and traditional math, and those bars are shown there. 99 people started working it. They're very small in orange to the right-hand side. By the time you get to 2008, 9, 10, 11, 12, and 13, almost every district in the state had walked away from integrated math. Not because they were told to, because it made the most sense, and that was what was not working. Final slide I have shows MJC. Even their math pathway for STEM works through a trigonometry, pre-calculus, calculus, algebra track. If we're aligning what we're doing to the universities and the MJCs and the junior colleges, then we're doing it differently. Because when I look at the UC programs, the CSU programs, the private university programs, they're not doing it the integrated way. If you're walking out of here and you have not completed these programs, you're in remediation. You hit the college door in trigonometry at Davis, you're in remediation. If you're getting into a science technology program or a business program, even UC Berkeley, the business program at UC Berkeley requires freshmen to be ready for calculus. The pathways the colleges are using aren't the same as we're using. It seems to me to make logical sense to align to what they're doing if that's what we're supposedly preparing them to do. If they get through Algebra 2 geometry and they're doing ROP or CTE or agricultural welding or going into the Gallo internship program, they're still prepared. And I went as quick as I could because we spent a lot of time on this tonight.
Thank you very much, Trustee Walker. Do we have any questions from the board? I'll just put one question forward then. Just sort of looking at this globally, what happens if we don't follow the state standards?
Ed codes, and that's not what I'm asking. It's not what I'm proposing. I think we could backfill, because I think when we talk about the English language arts content, we can take what we have been given with the curriculum that Thor's spent a lot of time and Ed Services spent a lot of time on. That's easy enough to sort of backfill and add to and increase things and add new projects and do group things. I don't think the same is true on mathematics. I think if you do not get the fundamentals and you have these things squarely math facts up and are able to move forward, we're in trouble. And I think it's very difficult, as Dominic has just stated, working with his tutoring with the kids. Once they get off the track, it's hard to get them back. And again, me and Dominic talked at the break. I'm not asking to change that. Do we have the power to do that? Yes. The California Ed Code specifically states that the state standards are a model. We do not have to accept them. That's not what I'm asking. That's a huge reach. I would jump for joy, but I'm not that naive. Okay? What I'm saying is, if we put back to a traditional approach, we could fill these gaps in, we could accelerate students, we could get them going in 8th grade, you would be in a position to make up a Algebra 1 and a geometry class at the same time. But yes, the short answer to your question is, we are not required to follow those standards. We can adopt our own, and if we ever get to the point where I do that cartwheel, I've got them sitting here. That's not what I'm asking tonight.
Right, and I wasn't suggesting that you were, because I did read the information that you sent us, and I saw that, but I'm just curious, has anyone switched, and then what actually happens in reality as far as funding or requirements or whatever? And go ahead.
The only one I know that attempted this was Orange County, and they bailed and walked away because it was at the County Office of Education. Again, that's a much bigger lift than what I'm looking for here tonight. I'm just trying to get back a traditional pathway that supports a creative, more diverse way to get through this that gets us out of an integrated approach. But yes, Orange County talked about it. Orange County waffled. And again, the state threatens with money, but I don't think that's a strong threat, but not what I'm asking.
All right, thank you. Do you have a comment?
Yes, and I'm trying to follow the conversation because we're talking about integrated, traditional, we're talking about curriculum, and we're talking about standards, I do want the board to know that LCAP is required to speak to the 8 state priorities. Priority 2 is implementation of state standards. I have the LCAP addendum worksheet that I have to report on, and it specifically says the implementation of state board adopted academic content and performance standards for all students, which are, it lists many, and then it says B, mathematics, Common Core state standards for mathematics. So that is part of the LCAP process. If we ever went away from that, it would put us immediately into technical assistance. It's part of the LCAP. Now, maybe that doesn't jive with ed code, but I didn't,
Okay.
that
and you
is
say
part
would
of the
require
LCAP.
technical assistance. Explain that.
Because we haven't had that yet. I don't know what that looks like. Nobody's had that yet. But the LCAP is also used as a measuring tool for districts that are not making adequate progress nor implementing all the priorities that are required.
Okay, thank you. Trustee Newman?
Trustee Walker, thank you for your hard work on this. Okay, so I just want to clarify something, because if you're basically advocating getting rid of the integrated and moving to traditional, but we still would be under Common Core curriculum, and he's nodding his head yes. So the state did have, we did have a choice as a district to do integrated or traditional. The
Right.
traditional wouldn't look like the traditional as it looked before, if I understood Ms. Cross correctly, and she's nodding. Okay, because it would still look like the Common Core curriculum that we are seeing, but it wouldn't be integrated, and so the benefit you're identifying for moving back to traditional is simultaneous. Students they could then accelerate in high school and simultaneously take geometry, Common Core geometry and Common Core algebra at the same time.
Correct. It would be an advantage to that track because then you could do them both. There was one person that talked tonight about doing SM1 and 2 concurrently. That seems like it's an awful big lift for most
Yes.
of our students. I know a couple that could, but to me, that's not a viable solution.
Okay.
If that makes sense for both of us as parents. Even if you're really good,
Yeah, no.
that's a stretch.
Having had kids that have gone through Math 1 and Math 2, I can't see that you could take both at the same time. I think that would be really difficult. Okay, so I just kind of want to understand where, and you want us to look at moving away from the integrated, but keeping with the Common Core curriculum.
I wasn't trying to make that big of a lift yet.
Right.
But I think it does give us more opportunities to backfill when we need to. If we're not, then again, we can adopt whatever Algebra 1, Algebra 2 geometry, as long as it covers what they're talking about, we could still raise that bar and get a more algebraic based thing. There's things me and you have talked about occasionally because we both have students that do well in math.
Right.
And a more algebraic structure does work out longer term. I know there's a focus on geometry, but I never had to take it. I had to do trig, but I think it gives us more flexibility.
And I have talked to parents that I appreciate our district when we brought Dr. Foster, am I right, David Foster, when we rented out the Gallo and we brought David Foster. And he talked about how the only time, and this was prior to us implementing this, he talked about the only time you can accelerate under the Common Core really is to accelerate. The best time to accelerate would be for your advanced students would be in junior high, which is what we've done. As you can see on our sequencing charts that Mr. Coates put out before, he showed us that. If our feeder districts aren't doing that, is that where,
I think that's the other part of my contention here is we're in a unique situation with 7 feeder districts.
yeah,
And I know what Sylvan's doing, and they're not accelerating. And there are certain students that do very well based on the teacher. But if we're on a traditional approach, it's far easier for a feeder district to start doing a Common Core Algebra 1 approach in 8th grade if you want to accelerate those students and get them ready to move into one of our advanced tracks. It's a unique situation we're in with 7 feeders because it circles us all the way around.
right.
And then even if they didn't, I mean, again, how do they line up unless they go by the exact same integrated curriculum we're buying and teach it the exact same way we're doing, which seems like another large stretch to get 7 districts to get in line with exactly what we're doing because that's what they decided. We're on a board. It's hard enough to get 7 people to agree on anything.
Well, Miss Johnson mentioned during the break about our math task force, and we've got, I mean, I think Miss Cross is on the task force as well. Could we, I mean, I think this opportunity to accelerate is really important. I advocated for it in our district when we did it, the opportunity for junior high to accelerate. My sons, both of them, have taken secondary math 1 at junior high. And then they'll end up in calculus BC at the end of it all, if all goes well. But, so now I've lost my train of thought. But in the math task force, could we address this issue? Does this involve some feeder districts? This is actually a question for Ms. Johnson. Does it involve some of the feeder districts? Can we address this issue in a different way to kind of get more cohesion on this?
To do that would expand the task, or really the goals of the math task force. The math task force is made up of teachers, coaches, from 3rd grade all the way through 8th, and a couple high school teachers also. But the purpose is really to improve performance so our students are better prepared to enter high school with a stronger math foundation. We have not really talked about, it was really providing more PD for our teachers, ensuring even the administration understands new math. So that would be an expansion of what our goal is right now. The goal is by November of 2017, come back to the superintendent with a written report with recommendations.
Thank you.
All right, questions, Trustee Marks?
So, let me understand this, because I thought I heard this, so we're doing accelerated math in 8th grade, so our students are taking Algebra 1 in 8th grade. Are they still doing that? Because I know it's secondary math. Okay, so it's not Algebra 1 in 8th grade, because we did have that, we were doing that, and so now we're not doing it, correct? Am I correct on that?
Prior to the new standards, we did have some students taking algebra in the 8th grade. Now with these new standards, we have some students taking Math 1 in the 8th grade. So we had the same level of acceleration in both the old standards and the new standards, with them starting that acceleration in the 8th grade.
Okay. The acceleration begins in 7th grade. They take 7th and 8th grade math in 7th grade. And so they come in from 6th grade as advanced honor students, and then they take 7th and 8th grade math in 7th grade. And then in 8th grade, they take 9th grade secondary math 1.
Right, okay. So then they're set up, that group of students are set up to be able to take calculus their senior year.
Yes, calculus BC.
Trustee Barandika?
What's the feasibility of keeping both of these tracks open? Because I feel like we're kind of shutting the door on traditional mathematics. So like, I know it's like, through elementary, the feasibility, you have to stay with one kind of curriculum, but is there any way we can leave both open in high schools?
I would recommend, I'm looking to Mike, but I would recommend against that. I think that would be extremely difficult to offer PD. I mean, to do professional development in this district is a significant effort of educational services to address all content area in all areas. I think it would be very, Mike, that's just Ginger Johnson's point of view, but I personally think it would be very difficult.
Well, another piece of this is you really don't want to track students into a specific path where they don't have an option. And the more you design those specific tracks, students lose opportunities for the fluidity. And so if you have this, it's one, and this, it's, you're really losing that opportunity for students to move along at a pace that's designed to meet their needs. So that's one of my thoughts as well.
We're sitting on one track now, essentially. It's one track. It's SM 1, 2, 3. I mean, there's a speedy version of SM 1, 2, 3 that you've talked about, But again, I'll be honest, I see what my daughter's doing in Honors SM2 compared to what the normal textbook is, and I still have huge concerns that you can run that through SM3 and get all of pre-calculus, the trig-based advanced algebra, and pick up what got left off from Algebra 2 Light, because the graduation standard in California is Algebra 2 Light with geometry. So it seems to me we have one path now. There's a remediation path, there's an accelerated path that I have a child on that I don't think is all that accelerated, and then the normal path, but it's one path, is it not? The second path is the kids that are out there, the juniors and seniors now, that are leaving, looking back at their younger ones that, again, I don't know. I hear a different story when I talk to parents and students. This is the most I've ever sat anywhere and had people advocate to stay this way, ever in one room.
All right, any other questions from the board? Any comments from the public?
So I wanted to speak to a couple of those points. First of all, as Mr. Rich mentioned earlier, students are integrated up through 8th grade, and it was only at the high school level that we separated them out by domain. And the other role that I play in the district is I'm one of the 712 math curriculum coordinators. I'm a member of the math task force. I'm also a member of the Stanislaus Futures math task force, which does branch out to some of our feeder districts. And it has members from MJC and community CSU. And in that task force, we're having conversations with institutes of higher education on the way that they teach math. And they're actually looking to do some changes in what they're doing at the collegiate level. So we want to prepare students for that. I also work with our feeder districts, those 7 different feeder districts, in conversations about their accelerated pathways. Several of them do have an Honors Math 1, and those students would take Math 2 as freshmen, Honors Math 2, Honors Math 3, Calculus AB as juniors, and then potentially Calculus BC as seniors. I've worked with Sylvan quite closely, being an Enoch's teacher, and their teachers are actually teaching Math 1 standards. I work with them and shared our course outline. They call it Math 8, but it's actually Math 1 standards. And many of those students go directly to our Math 2 as freshmen. So we are providing the accelerated pathway even beyond our honors students into a 2-year accelerated pathway. As far as curriculum, I want to reiterate what I said earlier. I don't think it's necessarily the pathway. I think that we need to develop support materials for especially parents and students at home to really pair with our rich tasks. What I'm seeing the students do and the connections they can make in the integrated pathway actually leads them to collegiate level math. The pre-calculus standards we currently have actually are the plus standards for Math 1, 2, and 3. So they're not additional new standards. It's actually part of Math 1, 2, and 3. The standards have shifted down into Math 3. So it's actually easier to accelerate this way because we have less that we have to move in. Our Honors Math 3 does the bulk of the trigonometry, and it has a unit on limits and derivatives. And so it's really the foundations of calculus. The other advantage to the Math 1, 2, and 3 is the focus on rates of change and comparing rates of change in different function types. And really that's the foundation of calculus, is looking at instantaneous rate of change. And integral calculus is actually area under a curve, which is a geometric concept. So I had the standards for calculus and I was looking through them, and it actually says that calculus is an integrated math class that applies to physics, it applies to economics, it applies to chemistry, and it incorporates geometric and algebraic thinking as part of our calculus standards. And so really I believe that the integrated pathway will support students in their connected learning. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other comments from the public?
Hi, Melody McGill, science teachers at Roosevelt. You know, I appreciate, and I've been listening to the discussion all night, you know, we have a tendency in education, if something doesn't work immediately, let's get rid of it, let's move on. And I think we need to give time for this integrated math to work. You're talking about students that are coming in at the beginning of the transition from the 1997 standards into the new 2010 Common Core standards. So you're looking at juniors and seniors that are graduating that came up through the math system of students will know, not students will do. I was a product of the students will know. I can tell you a squared plus b squared equals c squared. Ask me what that means. I have no idea. But if you give me a math book, you give me a worksheet, I can sit down and do that. I don't have the conceptual knowledge necessarily behind me. And so I think we need to give it time and fill and do the support as has been discussed multiple times. Help support the parents, bring in that information that parents need, help support the students within the classroom. Let's not, because it's only been X number of years, let's give it some time. Let's look and see the kids that came in with the Common Core math as they transition through. Are they having some of the same struggles that we're seeing with the kids that were thrown into Common Core without any foundation, without any background? They just went from this to this without thinking about it. Thank you.
Thank you. Step up, thank you.
My name is Carolyn Viss, and I work at the Stanislaus County Office of Education with math teachers around the county as well. I'm also a high school math teacher from Riverbank and Waterford District for about 20 years. Taught the gamut from back when we had Math A and Math B before the 1997 standards came out. And I want to first of all say that I feel like the value of those standards we can't really overstate. The fact that we started and had those 1997 standards gave us opportunity as schools within this county to eliminate the 5-year plan for Algebra 1. That, you know, I can take, if I had 5 years in my high school experience, I could take 5 math courses and still not be at the level of Algebra 1. And that's something that the 1997 standards did for us. I was here before that was in place, and it was a gift. The success that students had around the county in terms of some of the data that you shared with, you know, in terms of students, subgroups, and successes with those standards, that was awesome. And I hesitate to declaim too much about it because it was measuring students' ability on a multiple choice test. And that's not the kind of skill that we want students to be. College ready, career ready. Multiple choice test isn't a sufficient way to measure the kinds of thinking that we want students to engage in for their futures, for our future. And so I feel like the Common Core standards have really taken that foundation that was built through the 1997 standards and providing access and equity to students around the county, around the state, to higher levels of math. And now we're given this new opportunity to provide space for students to think and to engage mathematically. I just wanted to address one comment too about the preparation for calculus and the threading of those trigonometry standards throughout the Math 1, Math 2, and Math 3 materials. I had opportunity to look through that with some other colleagues in the area as well. And the trigonometry standards are well represented throughout the sequence of standards from the state. So it is quite possible for a student after Math 1, Math 2, Math 3 to enter directly into an AP Calculus class at that point. Thank you.
Thank you.
So first I just want to appreciate all of you and those that have come to give comment for the open dialogue that we've been able to enjoy tonight. And, you know, as I've been listening to the conversation, I have been kind of jotting down some notes about the various kind of topics that we're grappling over. And one is pathways, you know, traditional or integrated. And another issue is the issue of acceleration, which is going to be a problem to solve regardless of traditional or integrated. And another is the curriculum that we have in place for students, which is going to be an issue regardless of whether we accelerate or go down this pathway or this pathway. And another issue is the teaching methods that teachers are learning to employ, which is still going to be there. And so as we, I hope, continue to engage in this discussion and persevere, I like to say to teachers and administrators that this is our math practice one. We need to make sense of problems and persevere in solving them. And so here we are making sense of it and beginning to persevere in solving these problems. I just want to encourage us to make sure we clarify the problems that we're trying to solve so that when we come up with a solution together, it's a solution to the right problem. Because if it doesn't match the problem, then we'll probably find ourselves continuing to spin our wheels with these challenges. So, thank you.
Thank you.
I'm Marla Romanoff Kitzman. I'm one of the math coordinators. This is a math problem from a book published in 1910, an algebra problem. Probably looks a lot like the math problems you had and I had. This is a problem out of our last algebra book. It was published, I think, in 2008. They look remarkably the same. This is a problem from MVP. If you look at the first two, all a student did was plug in and solve the formula. Okay, so the teacher introduces a quadratic formula, students plug in and solve. The next problem, the one you're looking at now, is with its student work superimposed, is talking about students looking at that same problem you were looking at with the quadratic formula, but the students are solving using pattern squares. They're trying to derive the quadratic formula themselves. They're not looking at a formula that's given that they memorized from a song and just plugging in. They're actually understanding why the quadratic formula works. This would be the first lesson. In the second lesson, you see they're getting more towards the mathematics. You're starting to see the mathematics, not just the squares, but they're visually and procedurally starting to be more fluent. And then the last part of the problem, the third problem in the series shows you where they've completely gotten to the quadratic formula, why it works, and the student's able to explain their thinking. So it's not that the mathematics is changed. It's quadratic formula. They're learning it freshman year of high school. It is one of the standards that was taken from 8th grade algebra, moved into what would be a 9th grade class. But the depth of the understanding and the student being able to apply the quadratic formula in a new circumstance is what we're talking about.
All right, thank you. All right, any other comments from the public? Okay, comments from the board. Trustee Grinbo?
Oops. It's twice. I see a integrated math program that for some people is working very well. I see a program that is not working so well for others. Why can't we have two sections? You're talking algebra, geometry, these seems to be, in trig and calculus, seems to be those people that are going to college. The college, when I was growing up, it was called the college prep. But there was other standards for those guys and girls that weren't going to college. They had a whole nother set of requirements to go. That's the way we think here, is that integrated math, that's not the only way. There's more than one way. There's a two-part for the college grads or non-college preps to have a separate type of math program. Seems to me like it would be the most desirable. I've been around. My first job was in an empire, and I was hired in a 74-75 school year, and I've been around that teaching 5th grade and combination 4-5. I found that math is easy. All you have to do is know your factors. How much emphasis are we placing on factors? You can, if you know your factors, adding, subtracting, multiplying, dividing, you can do any math, but you have to be secure in those factors. And the last thing I'd like to note is, in all those years, math changes just about every 7 years. How long did new math start? I mean, I was teaching when new math came around. I was, how long did No Child Left Behind last? Not very long. So all these different math and educational programs and educational philosophy change every time. And I think in most cases, it's back to the future.
Trustee Marks, do you have a comment?
Yeah, and I wanted to ask for clarification from John. I know this is your item. You did a great job presenting it, and I appreciated all the input from the public. I wanted to know, what are you asking us to do? What is the problem you're trying to solve? I want clarification, and I don't want...
I want to go back to a traditional math approach.
Right.
That's
got that.
I'm trying to solve the problem of integrated math in my mind. And again, I don't know if that's possible, but it's certainly something I feel is worthwhile doing. I think that ideally you end up doing what Stephen talked about and what Dominic's talked about, that you offer both pathways. At least there's a choice at that point. I don't know how possible that is. Ideal situation, yes. Then you end up with, what do they call? Market-based economics takes over. Who's enrolled in which classes will determine what goes forward, but that's a more difficult, I think, task. Maybe it's more appealing to do both and let folks choose. I think that, I want traditional math back because I know it works. I've seen what's happened between what my children were doing before, during the transition, and after the transition. And for the question the one asked about what happens to the one that got thrown into it, that have been in it and continue in it, drowning is what's going on at my house. And I'm doing all the support I can to get there, and it's still drowning. And the one that came out up front of it did very well because they weren't doing the integrated Common Core math in the Sylvan District at that point. She didn't run into that until she got to Enox, and she's still in the accelerator program, and she's not getting where she wants to be. But motion.
No,
I'm
okay,
trying to
so
answer your question.
I know, he was answering my question, but he was answering it really long way.
Okay.
Okay, so I would like to see us do something with traditional math. I don't know how that would work, and my reasoning behind it is that I have a friend who is she was a rocket scientist, and she lives in Cupertino, and she was on a statewide board with me, and their district, which is High Asian District, the parents are very active in it. They decided to stick with traditional math. Don't know if that was the best decision or not, but because their students were really high achieving students, the parents were very involved in it, they wanted to do that. Also, our student on our board, Dominique, and his frustration with the changes in math, the other families that I've spoken with that have had frustrations with the math curriculum that we've been teaching, also even some of the teachers that spoke tonight had extreme frustration. And then looking at, John had sent us another document the last month when this was going to be on the agenda that I read, and the fact that the traditional math helped minority students the most, they had the most gains with minority students, made me say, we have a high percentage of minority students in our district. I would like to continue with something that's going to help them be successful. So I'm not sure what, and maybe my other colleagues will suggest something. I don't have an answer to it, but I would like to see if there's a way that we can have an accelerated path. I know that's a possibility with integrated math, to have it accelerated, but then to try to figure out how to do a component that would be traditional. I think I can see where students need the basics, as Mr. Grenbo suggested, but how do we get to it's hard because we're already 3 years into this. That's my biggest struggle right now, is we're 3 years into this. So, go ahead. To do the, oh, right. Oh, okay. So, that format. Okay. Well, let me hear what you have to
We
say.
still
And I'll,
have, no, yeah, there's other people with comments.
oh, the support plan. Okay.
Trustee Newman?
Okay. Even if we, yeah, we are. Even if we move to traditional, it's not going to look like the 1997 standards. I think that's a crucial point to make. It is still has to be the Common Core curriculum, and it's going to look different. And so the kids are going to continue to struggle with it that are just coming into this because it's requiring a deeper level of thinking. And it's a whole different way of looking at this, and it's hard. And it's hard for us as parents to look at this. And so traditional isn't going to get back to what benefit you saw in the 1997 standards. If we offer that pathway, it's not going to get back to that. It isn't going to offer those benefits. So for that reason, I'm going to move, and I appreciate everybody's comments. I appreciate the teachers that are struggling and the students that are struggling. I do. I hear that, and I appreciate the parents that are struggling with this. And I'm not ignoring that. I believe we have to provide more resources. We have to provide more resources to our students. With the MVP program, with the MVP curriculum, my son continually complained there just needs to be more examples of how to do it. And so we need to provide that to the students, and so we have to first start with professional development and make sure that it's available to our teachers, and then providing it to our students. So I'm going to make a motion to move this forward, that because we can or can't make a motion, but I think we probably should, just so we move it forward. So I'm going to make a motion that we remain with the integrated curriculum, and we don't make a change at this time, but we continue to address this issue of the support that needs to happen for our students and our teachers.
All right, we're still open to comments from the board. I'm not sure that everyone had an opportunity to make a comment. My comment on this is that it's clear that there are opinions and evidence to support every which side possible that there is, if the people were here to talk. I'm not prepared to tonight to change anything, because I feel like this discussion has been fabulous. It's been incredible, but we would need teacher input, student input, administrative and parent input, way further beyond this one meeting tonight. And I still have to go back to Trustee Walker. I'm not sure that if you were even asking for approval tonight, because it said possibly ask.
I'm probably not going to get a second shot at this. It took 18 months to get here and 5 years worth of work to ask this question.
Right.
I've been at this for 5-6 years now. I'll die right now.
So you would like?
I would like to, but I'm not. I don't think I'm going to get there. But
okay.
At least
well, I mean, the thing is, this is like a really important decision that we would be making based on one meeting tonight.
Make a second motion that we come back and revisit this subject, because it's not going to change by the beginning of next year anyway. There was no way this would take effect going into the beginning of the next school year. For any change to take effect, it would almost have to be 14, 15 months down the road, which means that there would be time to sort of take a step back and think about it. There's no way this pivot can happen before we start school again. The idea is to start that process and start that thought process and get those inputs you're talking about and make those decisions in a careful, methodical way. There was no way this was going to flip on a dime. The idea was, is it possible to do it?
Okay, so are you still requesting a vote tonight?
Sure. I don't think I'm going to get it, but
well,
I'm not sure that kicking it down the road comes back again.
You're not sure you're going to get it, or
well,
that can be risky. So
I don't know that we're going to come back to this, but because once we make the decision, they're going to come back and they're going to buy curriculum.
Okay, you know what? Let's go to Superintendent Abel, and then I'll come back to you on whether you
Thank you,
really want to
President
go
Toll.
forward.
I'll be really quick. I fully agree with Trustee Newman's assessment of where we are right now. Yes, is it perfect? Absolutely not. We do need to offer more support to our students, our staff, and their parents as well. I think you'd all agree with me that we have a highly talented, skilled group of passionate teachers out here, and as well as administrators that can study make very expert recommendations as we move forward. Ms. Johnson already said that they're going to be coming forward sometime in the fall, I believe, with some more data and some recommendations. And I would just ask that as the task force go through all this and perhaps working with the feeder districts, that they keep these things in mind. I'd also like to say, just because I've heard some data on the struggling students, that they're actually performing better than expected with the integrated math. So if that's a concern, I think that data can come forth and we can show that it's making a difference. But, you know, again, we need so much more input, and parents, kids, staff, administrators. It's not just rip a Band-Aid off and make a decision about something this important. That's my 2 cents.
Okay, thank you very much. Trustee Brown?
I've been sitting here sponging tonight, listening and observing and learning, and I just want to say how impressed I am with the level of professionalism that's happening from our math professionals within the district. And I would hope that 7 of us on a dime would not make a decision that would counter the productivity that's happening within the schools. So I thank you for your efforts, and please keep us in the loop, because we're all decades behind with math learning. We aren't up to date. Well, except for John, with the current curriculum and the methodology. We need to be informed, and I appreciate this level of learning that's happened here tonight. So thank you.
Thank everyone. We have a motion by Trustee Newman to remain with integrated math, and we have a second by Trustee Allen. All those in favor, say aye and raise your hand.
Aye.
Aye. All right. All those opposed?
No.
Okay, so that is 4-3, and also with our student voting no, but that is a 4-3 vote to stay with integrated math.